Lift every voice and sing. welcome with me now Dr. Charles Lepper on his first official day of service as the 11th president of Grand Rapids Community College, as our college and university presidents honor the legacy of Dr. King.
Well, let's give the choir one more round of applause. That was amazing. Today, we gather as a community to celebrate the life and the legacy of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. I would love to stand here today and say that with almost 50 years after his passing, we have achieved the goals that he set out for us, and that we are living the dream that he had a better place where people were judged by the content of their character and not the color of their skin. Unfortunately, we cannot do that. Not yet. Not in our nation, nor in our world that is divided in so many ways. Each year we gather to reflect on Dr. King's words, his deeds, and his legacy. He reminded us often that change and equality happen only through action. We have made progress, considerable, if not dramatic progress, in these 50 years, but we have so much more work to do. Events such as this help keep our focus as a community on these goals and these dreams. Let us today listen to words and be inspired to act. Let us celebrate the young people here today and continue to build for them a foundation of action and change, and support them as they lead us in the days and years ahead. I am new in this role at GRCC as their president and new to this community. I look upon this crowd and thank you for the warm welcome that I have received, and I also know that I stand here with you as we continue this work together as a city, as a community, and as a nation to make Dr. King's dream a reality. Thank you all for being here.
It is my great pleasure to welcome Dr. Philomena Mantella, President of Grand Valley State University. Dr. Mantella is the first woman and the 5th president to lead and serve Grand Valley State University.
Good evening, everyone. It's an incredible honor to stand here with my colleagues, incredible partners at Davenport University and GRCC, and to bring our community together to honor the life and lasting impacts of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. Join me one more time in acknowledging the entire MLK Celebration Planning Committee for doing a great job in organizing this important gathering and creating this place for us to reflect. Please join me one more time. Thank you, President Pappas. Thank you, President Lepper, for your partnership, and welcome back to West Michigan, Chuck. We're proud to call you a Laker alum. You know I threw that in there, right? Glad you caught it. And we're looking forward to so many opportunities to collaborate together. What draws our institutions together on this day each year is that commitment we each have to educational access and equity. Dr. King believed that educational opportunity should be treated as a right, not as a privilege, and that we must all work to ensure that segregational bars are removed for everyone that faces them. Dr. King calls on leaders, like everyone gathered in this room, like everyone gathered online, to address these barriers and to close the gaps in educational opportunities for our students of color. Unfortunately, systemic inequity still exists in education today. We must maintain the urgency Dr. King expressed to close these gaps in educational equity and to lift the bar and overcome racism, including in higher education. But I have great faith and great hope that we can do this because of our young people. I know their passion because I hear them raise their voices every day. I've participated with them on campus marches. I've participated with them as we vote in record numbers. At GVSU, our students showed up as a top voting school in the nation, and I couldn't be prouder. Thank you. Thank you. Dr. King believed in the importance of civic engagement. He once said, "Our lives begin to end the day we become silent about the things that matter." It's fitting and not a coincidence that at Grand Valley we have chosen a theme this year of race and democracy. Today, youth voices must be heard. They are telling us what matters, and we need to listen. The strength and power of our engagement in the democratic process is as relevant and important today as it was in Dr. King's lifetime. He argued that it was a responsibility of every citizen to become actively involved in the political process and to make our voices heard to create a better society. Like many of you, I've been following what has been happening in communities right here in West Michigan. I'm concerned about the recent efforts to dismantle structures and supports for equity and inclusion in Ottawa County. Inclusion is critical to our economic and societal well-being, and we must engage with local leaders to ensure our communities are ones in which all people can thrive in a diverse and inclusive environment. Let me acknowledge a few of those young leaders I referenced earlier and you will meet a little later in the program. I want to just take a moment to congratulate our Inherit the Dream Scholarship recipients, and in particular to welcome Domingo Francisco Vargas from Innovation Central High School, who will join Grand Valley as a major in nursing next year. Welcome, Domingo. Now, as we pause to reflect on Dr. King's life and the indelible impact he had on history, I ask all of you, community members, to continue to take up the critical charge for educational access and social justice. It can be a daunting task, but let's remember what Dr. King himself said: "If I cannot do great things, I can do small things in a great way." Thank you very much.
Thank you, President Lepper and President Mantella. Friends, enjoy now a heartwarming reflection of past Dr. King commemorations via video, followed by a musical selection from the Western Michigan District Choir.
In this dream, we voice opposition to all forms of bigotry, including racism, sexism, and classism. One day, all of our children will not be judged by the color of their skin, first day is the day that you were born. The second day is the day that you discover why you were born.
So there's a lot of blood that got us here where we are now. Because 30 or 40 years ago when this thing got started, we couldn't have been here sitting like we sitting in this town tonight.
So we are, as the great poet laureate of Illinois taught us, Gwendolyn Brooks, we are each other's keeper. We are each other's harvest. We are each other's magnitude and beyond. We are responsible for one another.
Understand that we all must turn that mirror around and determine what role we play in this game to make ourselves better. Because here's the reality. We are, for better or for worse, tied to each other.
But it is so important to have that dream, to have a step in that pushes you on frequently when the road gets tough. And sometimes that's the only thing that will pull you through.
So when we talk about the victories of the civil rights movement, we have to acknowledge that these are our victories, and we can shape our own philosophies if we act together in pursuit of justice.
We have all of these children who don't know what happened. How can they appreciate the power of education if they think it comes with no cost?
And you know that there's so much work to be done in modern America. If we truly are to say that we are a country where we understand the hope that the dark past has taught us.
Americans of all colors, we have made tremendous progress. So that if I close my eyes in 1960 and then open them here in 2010, I might actually believe that what I see are the signs of full inclusion. But I ask the question, is it an illusion?
If you do nothing, nothing changes for ourselves or for the generations to come after us. And if we don't know that we, in this room, were the ones who did it, we won't know that we can do it again. And that's when the other side wins.
You begin with the protest, but you have to move on from there. Out of the protest, you have to move on to another stage. We are at one of those turning points in history where we need revolution, and revolution means reinventing our culture.
We are the beneficiaries of the dream.
We've inherited it. We've got to claim it. We've got to live it. We've got to embody it. And then we've got to run our way through this.
It's one thing to say, oh yeah, I love hip hop. I love rap music. Yeah, hip hop for life, baby. But do you love and respect the people it comes out of?
It's going to take each and every one of you. And don't point to your neighbor, don't look at your neighbor, because yes, I'm talking to you. And you, and you, and you. You have to be a part of the change that you want made.
Even if the odds are long, you should have faith in you. You should have the faith that if it's a million to one shot, well, I got shots.
If you want hope, you need to see the miracle that's yourself in the mirror right now. Even if it's just two people, you gotta find someone else who's willing to struggle and go through this thing with you. You can't do it by yourself.
How do we fight for the liberation of people who have less than you? Everyone must do their part, so figure out what yours is, what platforms you have. Where do people look to you for guidance?
The radical imaginary says our work must be different. It must be able to see love in the face of pure hate and animus. It must be one that comes from us.
When our parents got together, with each one of over 400 million options. And we knew. When the rest of society is telling you you're not worth nothing, I want you to remember that you're worth everything.
The core of knowing who you are, knowing that your experiences, that the things that move you, the things that you can touch, your skills, your talents, your passions, that those are the things that you should not get lost. That those are the things that you should give to the world.
African Americans have every reason to despise said and stood for. And when we set out to make that true, we have been the standard bearers for equality.
Amen. 27 years, Grand Rapids. 27 years. We will fight. One thing about Grand Rapids, we will fight. As you've just seen, 27 years. We don't take this light. You with me? You all with me? I need some feedback. I need some talk back, all right? Please welcome with me Dr. Richard Pappas, the 5th president of Davenport University, as he honors the legacy of Dr. King on behalf of his university.
Good evening. Good evening. We will fight. We will win. Put me in the game. I'm ready. You know, I'm the 5th president. We were founded in 1866, and I was in the initial class of Davenport. There's some people saying, I thought he looked familiar, but so I want to thank our host, Dr. Lepper, and welcome. Dr. Mantella, a good friend. What's so cool about this evening is 3 institutions who are dedicated to justice, social justice. And I came, and I've changed my comments based upon some of the things I've heard. I'm going to talk about the things I'm concerned about, and I am concerned. Growing violence against people of color, growing anti-Semitism, increased evidence of sexism throughout the country, violence against the LGBTQ plus community. In a recent poll, 42% of Americans say race relations in the United States are worse than they were a year ago. Last year, the American Jewish Committee released a report that found that nearly 1 out of every 4 Jews in the United States have been the subject of anti-Semitism. I'm talking about the past year. In 1 year. It's the highest rate they've ever seen. These are startling. And I started thinking about, well, what gives us hope? And I've experienced anti-Semitism, and we've experienced racism, sexism, etc. And I thought back to when I was in Poland, and I was at a concentration camp, Birkenau. And this one, they left the tracks up, the barracks, and you could just feel it. You could feel the terror, you could feel the silence, And then I remember a book that I read when I was just a kid that changed my life, changed my attitudes, changed everything. And it was a book called Black Like Me. And this is about a gentleman, John Howard Griffin, who wanted to experience prejudice, so he colored his skin, chemicals, so that he appeared to be black. And he went down south, and the racism he incurred was way over what he has anticipated. But we don't have to read the book, and we don't have to go visit someplace to feel it now, right? We can feel it right now. What gives me hope? As you listen to some of the things that GRCC and Grand Valley State University, and I'm going to tell you a couple of things about what Davenport is doing. It gives me hope because these are tangible, real efforts that are being made. You know, we're committed to raising the bar for higher education to put all students to have access to affordable, equitable, and quality education. But I'm not going to tell you a slogan. I'm going to talk about some of the programs we have. Urban education. We changed how you teach teachers to get more people of color into the teaching ranks. It makes a difference if you're a black or a brown kid and you see a black or a brown teacher. It makes a difference if the advisors and the counselors are like you, they represent you. Studies show that they graduate at a higher level when they see representation like them. So what we've done is we started an undergraduate degree in STEM, science, math, technology, and a grow your own philosophy in the schools. Weekly coaching, diversity and inclusion in every class, not a class, right? And data analytics so they know how each student is doing. And we'll get more people of color into the teaching profession. First generation. Do you know the first generation students don't do very well? They don't get to the second year. It's not that they're not smart, but they don't have that guidance that's needed. My parents, my dad was the first generation. He battled to get through what he needed to get through and became very successful. But I knew I was going to college. He told me, you may not, the way you're doing now, it may not be very good college. I said, what are you saying, Dad? You know. So I admire first generation. So what we've done is we've established peer mentoring. Peer mentoring. These peer mentors, and you know that in our first semester of that, 90% of the first generation students got to the second year. 90%. It was only like 10 or 15% before that. Casa Latina is our newest program. And this is a program I'm really excited about. Carlos Sanchez is our new executive director. Many of you may know Carlos. And by the way, he's a Davenport grad. That's not why we hired Carlos, but it did not hurt him, that's for sure. But one of the reasons that it's the fastest growing population but least represented in higher ed is the language, sometimes the language barrier. And so there's going to be language of Spanish and English throughout every course in these programs that we're establishing. And we believe it'll attract, retain, graduate, and place more into the community. Now, that's just some of the stuff. Both of my colleagues can say many things that they're doing, but together, getting more people of color to close the talent gap. How exciting is that? That's what we should be doing. We should give hope to students that are going through education. Education is still the answer, in many cases, out of poverty. Very few people are going to be professional athletes. Very few people will be professional entertainers. But they can be what they want to be by going through the educational process. And we at Davenport, I know GRCC and Grand Valley, are committed to providing that access to all of our students. So I welcome you here. I'm excited to be here with you all. Enjoy the rest of the program. Thank you.
Thank you, President Pappas. As a true reflection of our collaboration, Grand Rapids Community College, Grand Valley State University, and Davenport University have all established an Inherit the Dream Scholarship in honor of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. Each of our academic institutions selects a scholarship recipient who has demonstrated a commitment to justice through service, leadership, or involvement in various social justice activities. At this time, I'd like to invite representatives from Grand Rapids Community College, Grand Valley State University, and Davenport University to the stage in that order to announce their 2023 Inherit the Dream Scholarship recipients.
Good evening. A group of psalmists by the name of Maverick City Music recently released a song with the following lyrics. If you want to know what heaven looks like, it's looking like me and you. If you want to know what heaven sounds like, just let it fill the room. Dr. King's dream was in line with bringing heaven to earth, and this room is starting to look a lot like heaven. Dr. King's legacy lives on in women like Jada Swan, this year's Inherit the Dream Scholarship winner for Grand Rapids Community College. Jada was described by her teacher and recommender as a dynamic young woman with a brilliant and infectiously positive personality. Jada is constantly looking to improve herself, but rarely only for herself. It was clear to me upon meeting Jada for the first time that she cares about her community, loves her family, and has the passion, ambition, and support to achieve all of her dreams. Jada wrote this in her essay. Being a Black girl does come with its challenges, but I'm not going to let that dictate my future and my abilities. I am not going to overthink and doubt myself any longer just because society makes it seem that I can't live a better life. I look forward to seeing Jada on campus next year and hearing all the updates about how she is doing on reaching her goals. Here's a few words right now from Jada.
Hello. I would like to give thanks to my parents, teachers, counselors, and the ones who believed in me and pushed me to the best that I could be. When I was chosen for the Inherit the Dream Scholarship, I was thrilled to hear the news. GRCC has always been my choice. I am anticipating in attending GRCC and using the scholarship to become an OBGYN, which has continued to be my dream. I have been inspired by many family members in the field of medicine, and I know that this would exhilarate me, that I too will be a part of bringing new life, and bringing new life into the world for the first time, and seeing a mother's face filled with delight, which would bring me joy and accomplishment. With this Inherit the Dream Scholarship, I'm also planning to pay for education expenses deemed necessary. With great expectation, I'm looking forward to graduating from GRCC and going into the next chapter of my life. Thank you for your time.
I don't need to stand on the stand. Good evening, Bobby Springer. I have the privilege to introduce our scholarship winner, Domingo Francisco Vargas. I had an opportunity to go to his classroom at Innovation Central High School and share with him about this great honor that he had won the scholarship. We came out in the hallway and I was talking to him and he was just looking at me. And I shared with him that we really want to highlight you for all your great work that you've accomplished in high school. And I needed for you to do a couple things, over the next week. So I returned the following week, and this time we went to the classroom and we sat down and I kind of took some notes on some of his accomplishments. He's an honor roll student, Dean's List, National Honor Society. His major is nursing. He's in the Upward Bound program. He's dual enrolled at the Grand Rapids Community College. One of the great things that he likes to do is his church involvement. He loves to volunteer, the blood drive, Paper Gator. How many of you know about Paper Gator? This past year, the Pumpkin Path. He's a very humble individual, and I share with him, we're very excited to have him at Grand Valley State University, and we're going to take good care of him. And his goal is to get good grades, get involved in student activities, and to graduate from Grand Valley State University. I welcome Domingo to the stage.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Domingo Francisco. I am a current student at Grand Rapids Innovation Central High School. After high school, I plan on going to Grand Valley and going into the nursing program in the hopes of becoming a pediatric nurse. I would like to thank Mr. Bobby Springer for the opportunity of being here and receiving the scholarship. I know the importance of higher education, and this scholarship will give me the opportunity to continue my educational journey. I would like to thank my parents for their continuous support. A thank you to GBSU's TRIO Upper Bound program for the support in college prep during the past 4 years. A special thank you to Ms. Yesenia for helping me through the process of applying for colleges and scholarships, because without her help, this wouldn't be possible. A quote from Dr. King that stands out to me the most is when he says, "Intelligence plus character, that is the true goal of education." This goal is meaningful to me because education is not only about how much you can learn or how smart you can become, but your character along the way of your educational journey is just as important. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is LaToya Booker, and I serve as the Executive Director for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Davenport University. It is my pleasure to present to you our 2023 Inherit the Dream Scholarship winner, Jayla Proctor. Jayla attends East Kentwood High School. Go Falcons. We got several of those in the house tonight. Where she has maintained a 3.9 GPA while balancing several AP courses, orchestra, and participating in multiple sports. She plans to study nursing when she begins her studies at Davenport this fall. In her application, Jayla reflects on MLK's opinion that of all the forms of inequality, injustice in healthcare is the most shocking and inhumane. She describes her motivation for choosing a career in nursing as wanting to help increase trust between patients and providers, and ultimately improve health outcomes within the Black community. Additionally, she wrote in her essay how, quote, MLK Jr. understood the importance of education to understand yourself and the world around you better, end quote. As the secretary of East Kentwood's Spanish and Latine Student Association, Jayla is intentionally engaging in experiences to better understand those around her and to develop the cultural sensitivity that she describes as essential for creating a healthcare system where everyone feels like they are included and sees themselves represented. Congratulations, Jayla. We are excited to welcome you to Davenport this fall and definitely look forward to the positive impact we know you will make on our community.
Hello. Thank you so much. First, I just want to say thank you for this opportunity to be able to continue my educational journey and accomplish my dream of becoming a nurse. As Dr. Reverend Martin Luther King advocated, I see this educational opportunity as a way to influence the health outcomes within the diverse community where I live. And I want to say thank you to my family and friends for supporting me, and also a big thank you to the Kentwood teachers and coaching staff for encouraging me along the way.
Congratulations again, scholarship recipients. Now in its 18th year, the Warner Norcross and Judd Dr. Martin Luther King Social Justice Legacy Contest encourages 6th grade Grand Rapids Public School students to think about how Dr. King's legacy of peace and justice applies to the world in which they live, and submit a contest entry reacting to a racial social justice issue meaningful to them. Student entries were submitted in any format they selected. 3 students received prizes of 1st, 2nd, and 3rd place, and an additional 25 students were recognized as honorable mentions. Prizes included an iPad, Amazon tablet, and gift cards to We Are Lit, multicultural bookshop. Every student who entered received a certificate of participation. Please enjoy this video highlighting this year's winners.
I had a great experience in being a part of this process. I was very inspired and encouraged by how real Dr. King's legacy is to the students who entered the contest. And I was also struck by the variety of everything that the students entered. We had poems, we had collages, we had paintings, we had essays, and all of them were really exciting to see. I feel like this contest is important because it's important to let students engage with Dr. King's legacy. Dr. King had one of the most famous dreams in our nation's history, and so having students engage critically and intentionally with that dream in all variety of ways is why this contest is important and why we keep doing it every year. We want to provide our thank you to everyone who participated this year. This year we had 208 entries from 13 schools and 60 volunteer judges. I want to issue a special congratulations to the 3 winners that you'll be seeing here tonight.
My essay, I just poured my heart into it, and it really spoke from my heart and the facts about it. And I was feeling like kind of in 2nd and it's scarred feelings, like how it can also carry on with trauma. Yeah, words can be like really powerful sometimes, especially if they're mean words. But sometimes if they're encouraging, they can like really like lift you, like make you happy and smile. It really just makes you a positive person. Well, I think that about me, I don't know, I just really like love my movie. I just love to like write, and also I think writing aloud just makes me happy.
Well, my essay is mostly about the injustices that people of color have faced and what they deal with day to day. And it mostly talks about all the trials and tribulations we face just because of the color of our skin and how we don't get treated the same way as some other people. I chose to do an essay because it's really in my background, and my father, he's really good with words, and it's kind of with me. I like writing. I titled it that way because just the way I've seen the news and sometimes my own experiences personally, things are just not as just as they should be just because of our skin color. Well, in the first part of my essay, I wanted to mention him because he's a really important person in Black history, and I've been a fan of Martin Luther King myself, and I wanted to put him in that just to kind of respect him. I chose that quote because in 5th grade previously, my teacher had been teaching us about how we should treat people fairly and how to be kind to one another. And she showed us this video. It was about this kid on YouTube. His name is Kid President. And that's one of the quotes he said, and I just thought it really stuck with me. When I won the award and when my principal told me, I just felt really excited and shocked. And at the moment, I thought I had fallen asleep in class and was dreaming about it. And then when she told me, I was just kind of frozen for a minute, thinking about what that meant and how fortunate I was to do that.
I chose Martin Luther King Jr. and Rosa Parks for my artwork because I thought they would be a good role model. I thought they would be good role models because Martin Luther King tried to stop racism in Black and white people. And Rosa Parks, I thought she would be a good role model because she tried to stick up for her community. And she didn't let go of her piece of Black people. When people see my artwork, I want them to feel passion and beautifulness in Black people because some people think Black people are not supposed to be in this world, but they are. My artwork connected with Martin Luther King Jr. because I used his speech in my painting a little bit, and I used some of the Black images that I saw in there. I thought it would be cool to add something from Martin Luther King Jr. and put some of his legacy in our legacy. I chose the sentence because I thought it would be cool in the time that we always write for Black people to stand out in the community. No matter what time it is, the time is always to do right, no matter if it's bullying, standing up for yourself, or racism.
Friends, several of these amazingly talented students and dedicated teachers who participated in this year's Dr. Martin Luther King Social Justice Legacy Contest are here with us tonight. Let us take a moment to recognize them. Grand Rapids Public Schools, 6th graders and teachers, please stand so we may celebrate your efforts. Congratulations again. We'll hear again from the Spirit-filled Western Michigan District Choir, followed with a welcome from Mr. Carlos Cubia, Chief Officer of Inclusion, Equity, Diversity, and Sustainability from Corewell Health, our lead sponsor of tonight's Dr. King commemoration as he introduces our keynote speaker.
God is good all the time. I'm going to be real quick because we want to get to our keynote speaker. So I'm going to cut my remarks down and just simply say this. I'm going to introduce your brother God. But Corewell Health is proud to be a sponsor of this event. So you can give it up for Corewell. All of this, it doesn't even matter. The kids here tonight, that's our future. Let me say this. To see this many folks saying they're going into the healthcare field, we need folks in the healthcare field. We need to catch them early and let them know about the possibilities and the opportunities that lie ahead in the healthcare field. My name is Carlos Cubia, and I am the Chief Equity, Inclusion, Diversity, and Sustainability Officer, and all of that doesn't really mean anything. I'm here to make sure there's fair and equitable treatment for everybody. That is my job. I'm going to follow these kids that were here tonight, and when y'all graduate, you come see me at Corewell. Okay? Tonight, we know that we're here to honor Dr. King. I'm not going to go into that. You've heard from all of the speakers. I am going to say this, though. He is my fraternity brother, Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. So I got to put that out there. Tonight, and if you're not with the Alphas, it's all good. We love all of the Divine Nine. Dr. Eddie Glaude, a brother that I wake up every morning to watch on MSNBC to make sure he's there. His words are powerful. Everybody should, if you don't. He's one of the nation's most prominent scholars. Dr. Eddie Glaude Jr. is an author, political commentator, public intellectual, and passionate educator who examines the complex dynamics of the American experience. Listen to those words. His writings include Democracy in Black, How Race Still Enslaves the American Soul, In a Shade of Blue, Pragmatism and the Politics of Black America, and his most recent, the New York Times bestseller, Begin Again. James Baldwin's America and Its Urgent Lessons for Our Own takes a wide look at Black communities, the difficulties of race in the United States, and the challenges we face as a democracy. Dr. Glaude is the James S. McDonald Distinguished University Professor and Chair of the Department of African American Studies at Princeton, y'all. Come on, come on, come on. Y'all better act like you know. This brother is accomplished. He frequently appears in the media as a columnist for the Time magazine and as an MSNBC contributor on programs like Morning Joe and Deadline White House with Nicole Wallace. In his writings and speaking, Dr. Glaude is an American critic in the tradition of James Baldwin and Ralph Waldo Emerson. And to be mentioned in the voice with those individuals means that y'all about to hear from this brother. Dr. Glaude, I just want to say thank you for the work that you're doing. Come on, my brother, and let them hear from you. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Carlos, for that generous introduction, for yielding some of your time. I appreciate that. To the West Michigan District AME Zion Choir, I hear you. I hear you. I hear you. To Reverend Smith, thank you for guiding us to this moment. I appreciate you. Appreciate you. To President Leppard, to President Matella, to President Pappas, thank you for your leadership. Appreciate you. To Sister Erin, thank you for all the stuff you've been doing. To Brother Bobby, I appreciate you. Thank you. To Jada, Jayla, and Domingo, congratulations. Go ahead. To Kanaya, Remington, and Jack Hay, congratulations to all of the students. Appreciate you. Congratulations. To all the invisible labor, people who got the lights on, who set up the tables. We're going to shut this place down. We want to thank you. To Wood and Woods Catering, the mac and cheese was on point. Appreciate you. I'm just going to jump into this. Is that all right? I feel like preaching today. Each year, our celebration of the life and legacy of Dr. King affords us an opportunity to tell the story of this nation, to grapple with our central contradictions and highlight the heroism of not just Dr. King, but all of those everyday ordinary folk who risked everything to make real the promises of American democracy. We look back. We confront the horrors of slavery, the brutality of Jim Crow, the sacrifices of so many, and we narrate our journey to now. It is often a triumphant story, a reaffirmation of the abiding faith in the idea of a more perfect union, an assertion, despite the evidence, of America's goodness and innocence. But our celebrations also allow us to look to who we are currently, to assess how far we have come and how far we have to go. And over again, especially these last 6 years, this day reveals the tragic drama of American society. This day disrupts the triumphant story and reveals the hubris at the heart of our way of life. This year's celebration of Dr. King's life and legacy occurs against the backdrop of a nation in crisis. Americans are divided, and those divisions go well beyond ideological differences. They cut to the marrow of the bone. Too often we see each other as enemies. Disagreement is saturated with contempt. Mutuality drowns in the bitterness of our public discourse. The sense of common purpose and public good has been thrown into the trash bin as we huddle in our silos. And race shadows it all. Great replacement theory, panic and terror around demographic shifts, assaults on voting rights, on women's rights, anti-Semitism, all across the board. We find ourselves still fighting a civil war that the outcome of which we have yet to decide. In some ways, we misremember Dr. King. This doesn't sound like the guy on Morning Joe, does it? We misremember Dr. King. We consign him to a narrow rendering of his vision of I have a dream and put aside however gently his fundamental call to transform the very character of the country. And I use the word character here on purpose. Our standard stories of the civil rights movement and of Dr. King's witness work all too often to affirm American innocence. What Ralph Ellison, that is, described as this tendency to ignore the evil which can spring from good intentions. Ellison didn't too much like innocence. He preferred the word hubris, this flaw in character and perception. With hubris comes some form of arrogance and insolence, some form of overbearing pride. And for Ralph Ellison, the author of Invisible Man, right, the most damaging forms of insolence and pride in America is racism. Racism cripples our imagination. Racism deforms our moral sense and distorts our character. We have developed extensive rituals to evade it all, to put the ugliness of our past and present aside, rituals to forget in order to affirm our innocence. Hubris.
forgetfulness that makes us vulnerable to the ghost of our national past and the ugliness of our present. I want to give a shout out to the interpreters too. Thank y'all. I appreciate y'all. But the true irony surrounding the celebration this year is that we find ourselves struggling again over the issue of voting rights. Can you imagine? That struggle seemingly between red and blue states, Republicans and Democrats, involves a battle over what kind of country we will be. And that battle has always, it seems to me, entailed a question about the place and standing of black and brown folk in this country. Across America, there are forces that seek to undermine the ability to vote. The fact that America is quickly becoming a majority-minority nation has led some to conclude that if this place is to remain a white nation, democracy itself must be cast aside. We see those forces mobilizing and organizing in local municipalities and across state governments. I don't have to tell Michigan, y'all have to tell y'all about those forces in Michigan. Election deniers running for governor and secretaries of state may have lost, but many won down ballot. And we saw their presence and effect in the craziness of the U.S. House of Representatives not too long ago. And we still face the prospect of redistricting in states across the country that will dilute or abridge. Remember, the 15th Amendment says deny or abridge the vote. And the Supreme Court will rule on Moore v. Harper, which will determine in many ways the fate of our democracy, giving, if they win, right, giving state legislatures sovereignty to overrule the courts. How did we get here? And what must we do to beat back those forces that threaten to overdo and overrun everything Dr. King died for? We stand at a crossroads. We have to choose who and what we will be. And that choice has always been a vexing one because so many Americans suffer a deep uncertainty as to who they really are. And when that sense of uncertainty spikes, the ugly underbelly of this country reveals itself. Some will shout from the rooftops that ours must remain a white nation, and we're left to witness once again that tricky magic around race, an alchemy which transforms fears and hatreds into scapegoats and eases the pain of a nation still uncertain about who and what it is. On December 27th, 1962, just a few days after Christmas and amid the growing swell of sit-ins throughout the South, Dr. King found himself at a church conference in Nashville, Tennessee at the newly built University of Vanderbilt Law School's auditorium. And the conference centered around, quote, the ethics of integration. Can y'all hear me in the back? The ethics of integration. And Dr. King took it as his charge to defend his view of integration as something more than desegregation. He made it clear that the nation and the world could not afford the luxury of what he called an anemic democracy. And the problem of race and color prejudice, he maintained, left the United States mired in conflicts that left it bereft of a clear moral compass. He makes a distinction that I think is particularly useful for our current moment, because it takes us to the heart of the spiritual malaise and madness that engulf the country today. And remember, this is 1962, before the March on Washington, before the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 64 and the Voting Rights Act of 65. So Dr. King begins by acknowledging the importance of desegregation efforts. Since the 1954 Brown v. Board decision, he maintained, there had been a systematic effort to dismantle segregation. As he put it, quote, the bells of history are definitely tolling, for segregation. I'm convinced, he said, that in less than 10 years, desegregation will be a reality throughout the South, end quote. But he argued that even if desegregation was 100% successful, the relationships between human beings in this country would remain deeply problematic. He used the language monumental. Desegregation for Dr. King was a negative formulation. Quote, it simply removed legal and social prohibitions, end quote. But integration, King argued, is, quote, the positive acceptance of desegregation and the welcome participation of Negroes into the total range of human activities. Integration is genuine intergroup, interpersonal doing, end quote. Walk with me. I'm reminded of the words of the theologian Howard Thurman. In his book, A Luminous Darkness, Thurman wrote that, quote, it must be remembered that segregation is a mood, a state of man, and its external manifestation is external, of course, right? He says the root of the evil, and evil it is in the human spirit, end quote. Thurman went on to say that, quote, laws which make segregation illegal may or may not attack the root of the evil. The law cannot deal with the human spirit directly, end quote. In other words, if there is no fundamental transformation of the person, if there's no fundamental transformation of the society, Thurman argued, then those who bear the brunt of that society's contradictions will find themselves over and over again navigating and negotiating the hubris that threatens democracy. Over and over again, having to navigate the madness that threatens to overwhelm. Over and over again, having to deal with the underbelly of American life. Dr. King put it this way, quote, I keep looking at my watch because this is high church. I wanted to end on time. Dr. King said this, integration, listen y'all, integration is the ultimate goal of our national community. Thus, as America pursues the important task of respecting the letter of the law, that is, compliance with desegregation decisions, she must be equally concerned with the spirit of the law. Montesquieu. With the spirit of the law, that is, commitment to the democratic dream of integration. Listen, he keeps going. He says, we do not have to look very far to see the pernicious effects of a desegregated society that is not integrated. It leads to physical proximity without spiritual affinity. It leads to physical proximity without spiritual affinity. It gives us a society where men are physically desegregated and spiritually segregated, where elbows are together but hearts are apart. Elbows are together but hearts are apart. It gives us special togetherness and spiritual apartness. It leaves us with a stagnant equality of sameness rather than a constructive equality of oneness, end quote. To be clear, Dr. King is not denying the significance of desegregation or the importance of legislation and judicial rulings in resolving the problem of race and color prejudice. He's clear that legal and legislative acts have and can alter the habits of people. But breaking down legal barriers alone isn't sufficient. It's necessary. I don't want anybody lynching anybody. I don't want anybody discriminating against folk in terms of employment and housing and the like, but it's not sufficient. King said something must touch the hearts and souls of men and women so that they will come together spiritually, because it is natural and right, end quote. So the ethic of integration demands a kind of recognition of the sacredness of personality and that human beings aren't things, that we aren't disposable. It requires the acknowledgement that to deny others the capacity to determine their life's course, the freedom to be and to choose and to be responsible for that choice, is to deny life itself, King argued. Quote, nothing can be more diabolical, King wrote, than a deliberate attempt to destroy in any man or woman their will to be a man or woman, and to withhold from them that something that constitutes their true reserve. A society based on the view that some people ought to be valued more than others because of the color of their skin. Remington said that, didn't he? That a society based on the view that some people ought to be valued more than others because of the color of their skin, and that view affects the distribution of advantage and disadvantage, denies the freedom of those who bear the brunt of it. It denies them the opportunity to fulfill their total capacity, to actualize their talents. That's just Emerson's self-reliance. Yes? People talking about woke, they haven't read that damn Thoreau or Emerson. Y'all don't get that joke, I'll explain it later. The ethics of integration recognizes the solidarity of the human family, that race does not mark us as fundamentally different, and that human flourishing is bound up with our living together, not apart. And for King, given his Christian commitments, this is all a reflection that every human being, no matter the color of their skin, who they love, the circumstances of their birth, their zip code must be respected because God loves us all. And for Dr. King, this moral and ethical dimension of integration sets it apart as a critical feature of any fundamental transformation of the country. This isn't an enforceable obligation, but an obligation nevertheless if we are to rid ourselves of the madness and hubris that distorts and disfigures who we are. Desegregation without fundamental integration leads to physical proximity without spiritual affinity. We become separate and mysteries to each other, not knowing who we are and who our fellows are. And stereotype stands in for actual human beings. And in these segregated spaces, the intimacy of hatred metastasizes. What do I mean? People knew who tied that cotton gin around Emmett Till's neck and threw him in the Tallahatchie River. How did they know? They played checkers with him. They drank beer with them. They loved them. People know who stormed the Capitol on January 6th. They're your uncles and aunts and your brothers and sisters. They coach your teams. They come to dinner. You love them. You tolerate what they believe, the intimacy of hatred. Where fear and grievance festers and metastasize. Y'all following me? So King says, desegregation without integration leads to a kind of physical togetherness, but a spiritual apartness. Oh, we can just think about how Grand Rapids is zoned. Oh, we can think about the Sunday church hour. We can think about certain school districts. Oh, I'm getting ahead of myself. Fast forward. That was 1962. Fast forward to the year of his death. Dr. King had come to see that the nation had failed to live up to this ethical demand. Just a few moments before his death on February 23rd, 1968, at a Carnegie Hall event celebrating the life of W.E.B. Du Bois, the famous African-American intellectual who helped found the NAACP and wrote The Souls of Black Folk. Dr. King delivered a speech honoring the great man, and Stanley Levinson, one of King's trusted advisors, didn't like the speech much. He said, quote, "I've never heard Martin read anything as badly." For Levinson, it was a sign of King's depression. A few years removed from the euphoria of the 1963 March on Washington and his historic I Have a Dream speech and the legislative triumphs of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965, Dr. King now confronted the uncertainty of his moral vision for the country. He had to admit that white America was not ready for genuine racial equality. The violence against peaceful demonstrators marching for open and fair housing in Cicero, Illinois, revealed that racism was not a unique disease of the South. As Malcolm X once said, as long as you're south of the Canadian border, you're in the South. Dr. King also seemed alone in his belief that the moral stance of the civil rights movement offered a pathway for the nation's salvation. Younger black activists were tiring of the idea of redemptive suffering. Their patience had worn thin, and they were willing to fight back violently if necessary. The rising tide of white resentment and black rage threatened any serious moral transformation of the country. So in the short time between the euphoria of the March on Washington and this speech in New York honoring W.E.B. Du Bois, Dr. King had come to understand the depth of American racism. Much more was required of us if the country was to be saved. In the speech, he's actually taking up the last section of W.E.B. Du Bois's classic book, Black Reconstruction, published in 1935, particularly the section entitled The Propaganda of History. And there Du Bois is taking up the challenge of the Dunning School, the first historians to write about Reconstruction. And those historians said that Reconstruction was simply a kind of story of carpetbaggers and corrupt politicians, northern carpetbaggers, there it is, and those, right, who in some ways giving rights to the former slave. And that the Dunning School said this was a monstrous mistake. And Du Bois says, quote, "We have too often engaged in a deliberate attempt to change the facts of history so that the story will make pleasant reading for Americans," end quote. So King says this, listen at him now. "White historians have had for a century crudely distorted the Negro's role in Reconstruction years. It was a conscious and deliberate manipulation of history, and the stakes were high. Reconstruction was a period in which black men had a small measure of freedom of action. And if, as white historians tell the story, Negroes wallowed in corruption, opportunism, displayed spectacular stupidity, were wanton and evil and ignorant, their case was made. They would have proved that freedom was dangerous in the hands of inferior beings. One generation after another," King said, one generation after another of Americans were assiduously taught these falsehoods, and the collective mind of America became poisoned with racism and stunted with myths," end quote. Here King details how a certain view of history had justified the disenfranchisement of black men. Women didn't have the vote, remember. How a kind of willful forgetfulness enabled the country to turn its back on the promise of emancipation and to reject the idea that black people could be full-fledged citizens in the United States. Levinson was right. King was depressed. This wasn't 1962, it was 68. The country was in turmoil and he would be dead in less than 2 months. Listen to what he said, quote, "Negroes have heavy tasks today," he told the assembled. "We were partially liberated and then re-enslaved," he said. "We have to fight again on old battlefields," he said. And although black people have been fighting for freedom, King said, for more than 100 years, and even if the date of full emancipation is uncertain, what is explicitly certain is that the struggle for it will endure, end quote. This is a picture of Dr. King that doesn't often come into view on this day. We like to think of him on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, hands outstretched. It's actually on the program, isn't it? Hands outstretched, shouting, free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last. We like to think of him as the smiling preacher who called us to our better angels, but that's a fairy tale that secures our innocence and assures a quiet sleep. It keeps us from looking at the full scope of his life and why during those last days he struggled so mightily to see through the darkness that was this country. Now, about a month after his speech at Carnegie Hall, I'm trying to get to the end, y'all. I'm trying to keep you there. Y'all all right? I don't want to abuse your time. King appeared at the 68th annual convention of the Rabbinical Assembly, Brother Bobby. And one of my heroes, Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, introduced him as he prepared to engage in a rather interesting question and answer session. And there's this moment in the exchange that stands out. And remember, this is just 10 days before he's killed. And the question was asked, and as I travel the country, I get this question all the time. How can all of us who are concerned participate with you in seeking this goal of social justice, end quote. How can I help? And before he turned to the importance of the Poor People's Campaign, Dr. King's response is fascinating. Quote, let me say that we have failed to say something to America enough. However difficult it is to hear, however shocking it is to hear, we've got to face the fact that America is a racist country. We've got to face the fact that racism still occupies the throne of our nation. I don't think we will ultimately solve the problem of racial injustice until this is recognized and until this is worked on, end quote. Here, Dr. King was clear. Unless we are honest with ourselves, tell the truth about who we are and what we have done, we will never solve the problem of racial injustice in this country. We don't want to teach the facts of our history in our classrooms. We don't want to legislate policies to address long-standing inequalities. We don't want to live up to the ethics of integration, of the sacredness of human personality, of the freedom of all, for all, the interconnectedness and solidarity of human family, and the fact that every human being has dignity and standing. Instead, Americans prefer their illusions straight no chaser. What else is Eugene O'Neill writing about in The Iceman Cometh? But our need for illusions. And once the illusions are shattered, he said, I can't taste my liquor, Hickey. We prefer our illusions straight no chaser, but a nation that continues to lie to itself can never truly know who and what it is. Dr. King was right, and the evidence is clear. We are a racist country. And to admit such a thing is not to condemn ourselves to the gallows. In the Christian tradition, to admit that one is a sinner sets the stage to be born again. In fact, to admit such a thing sets the stage for the possibility for a new imagining, a new nation, a new way of being in the world, shorn of this insidious idea that some people, because of the color of their skin, are better than others. It opens up the way for us to see, as Ralph Ellison said, that the true subject of democracy is not simply material well-being, but the extension of the democratic process in the direction of perfecting itself. And the most obvious test and clue to that perfection is the inclusion of every single American. I got 5 minutes. On April 3rd, 1968, you see what I'm doing? On the eve of his assassination, Dr. King gave voice to what he knew was ahead of us. On this stormy night when he did not want to get out of bed, he made his way to the pulpit in Mason Temple in Memphis, Tennessee. And there he found the words to inspire and to warn. He spoke of the power of the historical moment, and he reminded the crowd of the ongoing failure of the country to make real his promises. Remember, he was organizing garbage workers. He understood the glaring contradictions of being poor in the richest country in the world. Quote, he said, "It's all right to talk about long white robes over yonder and all of its symbolism, but ultimately people want some suits and dresses and shoes to wear down here." He said, "It's all right to talk about streets flowing with milk and honey, but God has commanded us to be concerned about the slums down here and his children who can't eat 3 square meals a day. It's all right to talk about the new Jerusalem, but one day God's preacher must talk about the new New York, the new Atlanta, the new Philadelphia, the new Los Angeles, the new Memphis, Tennessee." Dr. King turned the attention of the audience to the material conditions that characterized their way of life. Too many languished in poverty. Too many struggled to imagine a better world. And then the famed preacher offered the words that mean so much to me on this day. "Well, I don't know what will happen now. We've got some difficult days ahead. But it doesn't really matter to me now, because I've seen the promised land. And I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. So I'm not fearing any man, for my eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord." Now, all too often on this day, we rush to celebrate the life of Dr. King, right? And like so many Christians, we run past the darkness of Saturday in order to bask in the light of Resurrection Sunday. We are quick to talk about the promised land, but we forget what he said. We've got some difficult days ahead. And since his death in 1968, America has repeatedly turned its back on what Dr. King died for. And today we find ourselves wondering if we will survive this moment of storm and stress. There are forces in our country that are hell-bent on turning back the clock, forces that have little to no concern for democratic principles, forces that darken the heart and inflame fears. Our task on this day is not to simply lift up the symbol of Dr. King and pat ourselves on the back for doing so. Our task is to understand the fullness of his life's message, to grab hold not only of his commitment to nonviolence and his invocation of love, but to understand fully the depth of his despair at the end of his life and what he and the movement out of which he came called us to be. We must finally leave behind this idea of innocence and the hubris that leads some to believe that this country belongs to white folk. We must finally grow the hell up. Today we must face the fact that the sense of connection, of mutuality so necessary for democratic life has been ripped to shreds. That we're not clear about our obligations to each other. Ours is a society marked by greed and selfishness, hatred and fear. Philanthropy stands in for any robust sense of the public good. We seem to care only about ourselves or those with whom we have some sort of connection. In short, the ethic of integration has long since been cast aside. I'm not sure what the moral and social contract is that underlies our being together. Dr. King understood in his last days that how we imagine our lives together is actually essential to our survival. Those difficult days have been and are marked by our refusal to see ourselves in the lives of another, to take responsibility for the well-being of those with whom we live. Instead, we shout and scream and fight and fear and hate. And the republic stands on the precipice because of it all. At the time of his death, Dr. King understood that if we're going to achieve our country, we would have to shatter the fables and myths that protect our national innocence. We would have to confront the lies that give comfort to the status quo. We would have to look in the mirror and finally see who or what is looking back at us. The difficulty of our days has ripped off the mask of this nation's racial politics. We must now face up to the reality of who we can be and to the past that made us who we are. So this celebration occasions an extraordinary opportunity for you and me. We can confront the life in the grave, not for who we want him to be, but for who he actually was, faults and all. And with him, we can imagine a new America, where the beloved community can take shape, where in our intimate relationships with each other, we can break down barriers that blind us to the humanity of those with whom we live. I am not your charity case. Equality is not yours to give to me, damn it. I'm just as skeptical. I shouldn't be cussing in the pulpit. I just felt my mama pop me in the back of my head. I'm just as skeptical of the loud racist as I am of those who believe justice is a philanthropic or charitable enterprise. Jimmy Baldwin would say, I'm skeptical of someone who wants to do something for me as opposed to with me. We can cast away the false idols of racism and treasure the beauty of human beings and all of their difference. How Dr. King imagined civic life, how he insisted on the beloved community shorn of sentimentality and rooted in a just order, his unshakable willingness to speak truth to power no matter the consequences. These values ought to shape our embrace of him, not the image of the happy, nonviolent saint who sanctifies your national innocence. Let's celebrate him tonight by fighting for a more just America, by risking everything in this moment to fight back those forces that harden the heart and corrupt the soul. Let's celebrate him today, GRCC, by living into your mission. Let's celebrate him, Grand Valley, by having a university that looks like America. Let's celebrate him, Davenport, not by engaging in charity, but by transforming the fundamental foundations of the country. Let's honor him by imagining America anew. Let's finally tell the ghosts that haunt where I'm from, on the coast of Mississippi, where bald cypress trees cast dark shadows on rivers and bayous. When people don't die right, they don't stay in the ground. Our ghosts haunt. They have the nation by the throat. Let's imagine America anew together and tell those ghosts to go on and rest now. We're giving birth to a new America. We've become better midwives, and we together, for those babies, will give birth to a country where the sacredness of personality, the freedom of all, the interconnectedness of the human family will be made tangible and concrete. Thank you so much.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Glau, for your powerful and moving words. Say it one more time. Thank you so very much. Yeah. You set the tone for us going into our 28th year, and we thank you. We thank you. So in closing tonight, we just want to end by, again, accepting the charge that each of us has to keep it moving forward. Amen? And so just quickly, Cake It by the Jar, Deaf and Hard of Hearing Services, Fountain Street Church, Isabel Media Studios, Michelle Karen Designs, West Michigan AME Zion District Choir, Woods and Woods Catering, we thank you all, and especially Dr. Eddie S. Glaude Jr., we thank you. We thank you. Friends, we forge on in this great work. We thank you for coming. Please be safe in your return home. If you've parked in our Bostwick ramp, the parking arms will be up with no charge until approximately 9 p.m. Now we'll receive one final time the Western Michigan District Choir. Good night, everyone.